What's going on, Ball and Glove loving Brewer fans? Welcome to this segment of our Brewers video series. I guess we'll call it that, hosted by the Wisconsin Sports Trilogy. I'm Tyler. You can find me on Twitter at Tyler Kurth. You can find my articles at Reviewing the Brew. And joining me over there is my cheesehead loving buddy Trevor. You can find him on Twitter at Bender_Trevor. So I dragged him over here today because a couple weeks ago we talked about free agents, especially offensively. And we talked a lot about James McCann at the catcher position. And I just really can't shake this idea of what the Brewers should do there. So I wanted to spend some more time on it today because I think they kind of are down to two options. Either you, elect to keep both Narvaez and Pina and kind of that platoon going into 2021, or you say, screw it, let's get rid of them both and let's go for James McCann because let's be real, there's no way we're getting JT or Muto. He wants to set a average annual value record as a catcher, which would be more than $23 million per year. So way out of the Brewers' price range. So James McCann would be the second best option. So let's start this video segment off here by reviewing Omar Narvaez first here. So everyone criticizes Omar Narvaez's defense. So right here I have him catching for Corbin Burns. Does a good job of getting in front of the ball. I thought that was important to highlight. And here it's with Josh Hader. Again, blocks the ball in the dirt. Something he improved a lot on this year. In fact, he recorded 0 passed balls in 2020, which is a dramatic increase from especially 2018, his worst year, when he had 12, which was 4th most in the league. This one here was from his Mariner days, and I just thought it was funny because he was throwing to Dan Vogelbach. So here he's throwing out Harrison Bader of the Cardinals, one of the fastest guys in the MLB. So getting a little bit better at throwing runners out. He threw 30% out this year, which is a big increase for him. League average is normally around like that mid-25-ish range. And here you got him throwing another runner out. Just a perfect throw, like just right into the glove of Luis Urias right there. Up next, we got Manny Pina, obviously a fan favorite here for the Brewers. This is from a game earlier in 2020 where he actually hit 2 home runs in one game. That one was perfect pitch for him to hit up in the zone there, blast it into the Brewers bullpen, which I still can't remember why they were in left field this year, but he did it. There is Manny Pina. He's been fairly consistent for the Brewers offensively. He's never really racked up a huge amount of like plate appearances in a single season. But when he's out there, he's been productive. He can usually get you around 10 home runs in a year, which as a backup catcher offensively, that's pretty good. The biggest question would be if he was your everyday guy, what would you expect? And we've just never really seen that. Here's his second home run in that game. That one's just low and away, and he just slashes it right out of there. So good stuff there for Manny Pina. Obviously, we know his defense is super elite. He's one of the best in the MLB.
Yeah, I mean, Manny Pina is, like you said, it's like, what do you think of Manny Pina? What are your thoughts of him? And every time I get asked that question, it's like, I love him. I think he's a great player, but him being a great player and a great asset to your team is kind of at the best, it's got to be a platoon spot for him, right? Like it's not something that he is going to be an all-star like catcher. He's just not. That's not who he is. He's a great platoon or backup catcher in this league, and that's something that is definitely something you have to consider with him, right? If you're going to keep Manny Pina, it really is probably a smart idea to have someone else. I think he could probably be an everyday catcher, but like Tyler said, what does that mean for him? What does that mean if he would play, I don't know how many games catchers play. Let's say 140 games in a season, and he's starting 140 games. Like, what kind of production would he have, both offensively and defensively? Because he hasn't really been that throughout his career. So that's something that it's interesting. And I like him as a player. You know, the most games he's played is 107 in his career. So it's something to kind of think of. And, you know, if it's Manny Pina, if you want Manny Pina, you kind of have to have someone else. And right now, that guy's Omar Narvaez, right? Omar Narvaez, another guy, Tyler mentioned it, you know, he's been improving immensely defensively. And he is not the guy we saw in 2020, not even a little bit, right? You know, you just look at his career averages, they are nothing, absolutely nothing like what he did in 2020. And newsflash, neither is Christian Yelich, Keston Hiura, even though that's a small sample size for Keston. But to me, Omar Narvaez is going to bounce back offensively. So I personally like that tandem because I love what Manny Pena brings. I love what he does for this pitching staff, all of those types of things. And then Omar Narvaez, I expect to be back closer to his career average. That career average is, you know, about a 270 hitter. I would say before this year was probably like 275, 280, and this year brought him down quite a bit. And then on base percentage, you know, around 350, 360, slugging percentage about 400. You know, he's a good player and a good offensive player. So to me, I just feel like he's a guy that he's going to bounce back and you let him go. We mentioned this. Actually, it's going to be after when it comes out. Tyler and I recorded the full-length podcast before of, you know, we get rid of shortstops and they do good. I feel like if we get rid of Omar Narvaez, he's going to bounce back and be a really good player next year, especially offensively.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern because when we acquired him, he was supposed to be like the second or third best catcher offensively in the entire league behind Grandal, who we lost right before we acquired him. So there certainly is that bounce back ability, and of course being a lefty, Miller Park helps as well. I think the case that makes this interesting though is obviously like financials, right? Like Omar Narvaez, Manny Pina are both still in arbitration here. So Narvaez can earn anywhere from 2.725 mil to 3.1 in 2021, and Manny Pina 2.1 to 2.3. So if you keep both of those guys, you're putting 4.825 to 5.4 mil in money towards these two catchers, which isn't too terrible. But then the caveat to that is, would you rather kind of roll the dice, hope Narvaez bounces back, you know what you're getting in Pina, or would you rather go out and spend near that $8 to $10 million range with someone like James McCann? And he has been really good offensively. In fact, throughout the last 2 years, James McCann is second in batting average when compared against other catchers, fourth in on-base percentage, fifth in OPS, and seventh in home runs. So let's take a look at some of the stuff that he's doing here. So James McCann, as I mentioned, his offense has been his calling card the last couple seasons. He's on the rise. He's age 30 now, going on 31. So in terms of a catcher's life, I mean, you're not going to expect like 4 or 5 more years out of him. So like this is the time where James McCann's going to be wanting a good amount of money in a weird off season where owners didn't make any money. He might elect to go, hey, let me sign with a team for 1 more year. Let me just, as long as I'm their everyday catcher, I go out there, prove myself. That way for the 2022 season, I can sign that bigger extension and set myself up really well financially, as long as his bat continues to play, which it has been over the last 2 seasons, like I mentioned already, because guy for the White Sox was a big lift. I mean, he hit 4th primarily in the batting order as All-Star year in 2019, and then he also hit anywhere from 5th and 6th as well after that. And then defensively, he's pretty solid as well. He's a really good pitch framer. The guys like pitching to him. He's got a good throwing arm. Look at that. The guy's out by a mile. So obviously really good stuff there by him. He knows how to frame pitches. I think you obviously worry about when you transition catchers, like how's the pitching staff going to react? Like we have a young staff that performed really well this year, but I feel like James McCann will be up to the task. I mean, we brought in Yasmani Grandal, and the pitchers loved him and they did really well. And I feel like James McCann would have no problem transitioning as well with this Brewers staff.
Oh, okay, Tyler. So this is something that I just like. You told me before this. I asked you, didn't we already talk about James McCann? And you said, yeah, I just can't shake this idea, right? And I'm over it. I'm flat out. I'm over it. We just got done talking to David Stearns and Mark Atanasio in the form of Matt Carroll. And he told me money was going to be tight. And now you want to go spend an extra $3 to $5 million on a guy who, yeah, he's been playing better the last 2 years. But before that, 250, 264, 221, 253, 220 in terms of batting averages the 5 years before that. So definitely nothing spectacular. You know, he's getting up there in age. You don't know when those numbers are going to start coming down for him. They could keep going up like they did the last 2 years. They could go down again. Like I just like the consistency is not there for me. He hasn't been consistent enough to earn that type of money. And in a year and a team that can't just go spend willy-nilly, that's something that concerns me. And to me, a better option than James McCann is keeping Omar Narvaez. And because I think Omar Narvaez can be a very similar player. You look at their career stats, James McCann, we'll just go through their slash numbers, okay? James McCann, 249 for batting average, on base percentage of 300, slugging of 394, OPS 694. That's career averages. Yes, he's been better the last 2 years. Omar Narvaez with a terrible 2020, atrocious 176 batting average, is just flat out better career slash. You look at it, 267 for batting average, that's better. On base percentage, 355, that's better. Slugging percentage of 398, that's barely better. And then OPS is better because all the other three are better, right? At 753. So the career of Omar Narvaez has been better than James McCann. And yes, Omar Narvaez is terrible. Could he be terrible next year? Yes. Could James McCann be terrible next year? Yes. And there is not that much in terms of fielding. You know, actually, Omar Narvaez has a better pitch framing percentage according to Baseball Savant. James McCann is in the 88th percentile. Omar Narvaez is in the 100th percentile. That means he's the best at pitch framing in 2020, which is just wild to begin with. But you look at everything else, you look at the other numbers for Baseball Savant, their hitting numbers specifically. You know, throughout his career, there's a lot of blues in James McCann's numbers from 2015 to 2018. For Omar Narvaez, it's literally just in 2020. There's one bottom six performance for exit velocity in 2019, but all the rest of his issues have been in 2020. So it's a 1 year. This really reminds me of 2019 Corbin Burns. 1 year of just terrible, absolutely garbage. He's going to bounce back, and he's going to be better than James McCann next year. Mark my words. And he's ridiculously cheaper. And if you want to save even more money, I think Omar Narvaez is a bona fide can start every day type of catcher. And when he can't start, when you need him a day rest, I don't really care. Bring up Jacob Nottingham. They both, you know, Omar Narvaez bats lefty, Jacob Nottingham bats righty. Why not? You know, that's a cheaper option. You can get rid of Manny Pina. You can not sign James McCann, and you have money to spend on, you know, players that wear 71 for the Milwaukee Brewers.
You brought up 2 points that I'm really glad you did. The first one was Narvaez's exit velocity last year in 2019. It was some Mariners fan wrote this crazy article explaining this whole thing. He was basically like a bloop or a home run hitter. Like it was just like lobbing it to left field, and then his home runs, like out of like the average distance they covered, they were just barely over, like juice ball maybe from 2019. I don't know. But there was some correlation there, as because he had 22 home runs in 2019, and he never cracked 10 above that. And this year he showed no evidence at all of being a power hitter, which is what we thought we were getting. So there is some concern there for me offensively in regards to that. And then the pitch framing. You remember how wide the strike zone was this year? And Omar Narvaez, you mentioned you were surprised with his pitch framing. I was too, because everything just looks so forced out there to the eye. Like he'd be like, "Oh, ball's over here. Oh, I just framed it all the way over here." Like that, it was just way too obvious. At least I thought. But the strike zone was also immensely larger this year around Major League Baseball. For whatever reasons, they'll never admit it. I don't know. But if you want to, I get your point with saving money, and you can have Nottingham if you need it. But at the same time, if you go with James McCann right now, you're going to spend a little bit more money, sure. But you're getting a player who has proven to be on the rise over the last 2 years consistently.
He's 30 years old. Who cares if he's on the rise? He's old. He's going to be on the decline in the next year, so why spend the money?
Because you only need him for 2 years, right? 1 or 2 years max. Because after that, you have Feliciano coming up for the majors. Coming up to the majors, hopefully. Really, really good hitting prospect. And you also have Peyton Henry down there, really good defensive prospect. Jacob Nottingham, we know, is a good defensive player. He's got an in with Corbin Burns and working with him, and probably attributes to some of his success this year. So I feel like there is a way to rationalize saying, yes, we should spend more money on James McCann this year.
No, there's not. Because you say, oh, let's spend more money there. But then what does that mean? Okay, who the hell is playing third base this year? And who's going to be your closer? Who's going to be your closer? Because you're going to trade Josh Hader because you don't have money because you spent unnecessarily at the catcher's position.
This is not unnecessary money. Our offense is terrible this year. Terrible.
Yeah, and you want to know why? Because players didn't play well. Omar Narvaez, Christian Yelich, Keston Hiura, those players didn't play near their career averages, not even a little bit. That's why our offense was bad. Those 3 players start playing well. You get a piece at third base. I don't really know what the options are there, but you get a piece at third base, and even if it's a platoon at third base and you find someone at first, or it's a platoon at both those spots, but you get Lorenzo Cain back, you get Christian Yelich back to normal, you get Keston Hiura back to normal, and you get career average Omar Narvaez, this offense is going to be immensely better. It's not spending money just to spend money doesn't make sense. And spending money at the catcher position when you have players like Omar Narvaez, Manny Pina, Jacob Nottingham, to me, just does not make a lot of sense, because you can spend that money more prudently in other positions to make your team maximally better by spending money on positions that are bad. The catcher position offensively isn't great, but if they're batting 7th, 8th in your order, who gives a shit? Find someone at a different position, because these guys can do it defensively. They can do it defensively. They're batting 7th or 8th. Let's go find someone that can do it defensively at third base and also be a major league average hitter. Like, I just feel like there's more prudent ways to spend your money, including not trading Josh Hader.
We'll leave Josh Hader out of it. I totally get your point, though, on like emphasizing third base, or maybe in first, whatever you want to put it at there. You essentially have to hope for a Narvaez bounce back. And I feel like at his peak, Narvaez, he could be like a good 5 hitter in the lineup. Could be. That'd be the dream. But James McCann, we know he would be right now. So that's where you got to get that trade-off right there. So that's kind of my thoughts right now.
Okay, last thing. Let's see. James McCann has been in the league for 7 years. Omar Narvaez has been in the league for 5 years. Omar Narvaez has been the same player from 2016 to 2019 with a terrible 2020. James McCann was the same player from 2014 to 2018, and that was a below-average hitter at the catcher position. 2019, 2020, he's back to average, slightly above average hitter from the catching position. So to me, you're talking about consistency. Maybe Omar Narvaez is going to come back. No, Omar Narvaez as a player has been more consistently in that with one blip in the radar. James McCann's blip in the radar is being good.
All right, so you're choosing the guy who's been more consistent over the guy who's been on the rise. Is kind of where we're going to leave this argument here for today. And of course, the argument about prioritizing other positions. I get it. But I just couldn't shake this idea. I'll give you the slight edge in this debate, but you decide, fans. Someone back me up here. I'm calling in some reinforcements. So make sure you're checking out all of our other content here. We have podcasts that come out every Monday. We got Brew Crew Tuesday, and then we have usually a third Brewers video at some point in the week. So be sure to hit subscribe if you like it. See you later, Brewer fans.
Tristan Stearns and Narvaez.